Welcome back, Mobile Home Park Nation. Ferd Neiman here again with another episode. Today I've got two special guests for you. Really had a good opportunity to get to know these guys in the last couple of months. They just closed on a big mobile home portfolio, complicated deal. They both got day jobs. They've got regular life. They decided to get in MHP investing and they're kicking butt. So excited to have them tell a little bit more about their story. Please help me welcome my guests, Ryan Hill and Brett Bowman. Hey guys, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us, Ferd.
You got it, man. Brian, Brett. Well, I know you a little bit, obviously, but for our audience, they may or may not know you as well. So tell us a little bit more about your background, and then we'll get into how you guys got into MHP because it's definitely not the normal path that you guys have taken, but you've jumped in both feet, and it's going well for you.
Yeah, absolutely, Ferd. So I'm Ryan Hill. I'm by day I'm an elementary school principal in the Boise, Idaho area, and so my background, I taught high school science for 13 years and then became an administrator. I was also a real estate agent for 13 years, single family real estate, where I worked with another partner for, that was about 13 years as well. So moved to Idaho a couple of years ago and self-educated in the mobile home park space, probably a year and a half before we purchased our first, my wife and I, in July 2019, so about 2 years ago. A year ago, I didn't know Brett. He didn't know me, and we, kind of a God thing, serendipitous thing, connected us, and we've just kind of been expanding exponentially since this last fall, really. So we own 6 now and have 4 or 5 under contract. And so mostly in the Midwest. No, we own 8. Sorry, there's 2 up in Sun Valley, Idaho, that we're general partners on as well. So
Excellent.
Yep. Hey, so Brett Bowman. So my background is mostly in technology. So I've been in tech sector for over a dozen years, mostly in corporate finance and complicated project management type of roles. So really what I do with MHP is kind of perfect for my background, doing a lot of, Ferd, there's a lot of financial analysis that goes on, a lot of underwriting, tons of time in underwriting, right? And then there's a ton of complicated, hairy projects we get involved in too, and that's kind of stuff that excites me. So mostly what drew me to MHP, I started investing in single family homes several years ago, and kind of I think the typical real estate path of just trying to do kind of the BRRRR strategy where I'd buy one, rehab it, refi, repeat kind of thing. And just started realizing that wasn't scaling as fast as I thought it could with, you got to have an individual loan for each time. You got to have different property managers, or sometimes you can scale a little bit there, but it goes slow. And then I started realizing that there's better things to do in commercial. I got involved in some multifamily commercial, industrial commercial. And then like Ryan kind of alluded to, we kind of stumbled into meeting each other and getting to know each other. And he already was doing MHP, kind of convinced me that was the path, and I've been loving it. So that's kind of where we've been.
That's great. No, I had a similar experience with trying the BRRRR method, and I did it successfully for a few years, but it was just scalability was like, okay, can I really own 100 houses or 200 houses or 1,000 houses? And people do it. I know one guy in particular here in Kansas City does it well, but it's very few and far between that do it well and have the reserves and have the management. And then as a multifamily was very competitive cap rate wise, and in Kansas City probably less so than the West Coast of you guys, but it's still a competitive. So MHP seem to check all the boxes: real estate, diversification, economies of scale, limited competition, and then as Brett alluded to, very very intensive as far as underwriting, financial analysis, operational stuff. So it's a challenge every day. So that's kind of makes it exciting, makes it fun. I don't remember the last time I was bored from my work. I wish I was bored more. I joke with my team, like, one of these days I'm going to golf on Fridays, but I haven't golfed all year, and I don't even know where my clubs are, to be honest. So I think they're in my basement. But anyway, MHP's been fun. So tell us a little bit more about, specifically your first couple deals and and some of the challenges you guys had to face and how you got through them. I know the recent portfolio in Iowa, you guys had some Orangeburg sewer issues, those are definitely no picnic. And then you guys have been buying them for the most part halfway across the country. You guys are both West Coast. You're buying in the Midwest. So how does that work from a DD? Clearly, you're going to budget more money for flights than I will on drive time, right? but aside from just different DD, how does that work for you guys?
Mhm. Yeah, we have a strong management team that's based out of Kansas City area. So that's part of the reason why we are looking, 4 to 5 hours in a radius outside of there. So they started by managing my first park that I purchased 2 years ago. One, it's a married couple, one's an inspector and on commercial and residential, and he has his own handyman company as well. And then his wife does a great job of just the typical property management pieces. So they will, they're kind of our the folks that will go out and do the initial due diligence. So like, for example, our Missouri parks, we have 3 under contract right now. And we had a short DD period for 2 of them, and they were able to get out there within a couple of days. So that's a big reason why we've been able to scale quickly in the area. And then they're helping oversee the managers at the other parks as well. So Brett and I and some of our other partners, we take turns flying out. I just got back a couple weeks ago we were in Iowa, Kansas, and Missouri. I think about 10 parks total, and just plowing through them. So just all day long, which it's fun for me. It's fun for both of us. Doesn't seem like work to us. Just uncovering the rocks, talking to the contractors, electricians, plumbers. We have everything from lagoon to wastewater treatment plant, city utilities, of course. And so, you've done a lot of podcasts for it on all of those different fun adventures and those private utilities. And so, we had Orangeburg in one of the parks we closed on, and there wasn't a lot of Orangeburg. And actually it's still surprisingly in really good condition. So we don't have any plans day one or year one even to start replacing that until the need's there. But it seems to be holding up. But yeah, it's an adventure for sure. But we have good people in the area that do a lot of that legwork for us.
No, that sounds good. I mean, it makes sense on the Orangeburg in particular. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? We've got a park in mid-Missouri that it's got some Orangeburg, but the key is you identify it, you camera the lines, and then you have a professional bid it and say, look, you have this level of problem or you don't. Same with the one we're closing on in about 2 weeks. I think we budgeted 15,000 to replumb the whole park. Would cost $250,000, but we've got 15,000. We know exactly where it's at, where it's failing. We know what's been replaced, and we've got a camera line for like $600. There's a group out of Independence, Missouri that does it. Camera guys sometimes cost 2 or 3 times that much, but this guy is willing to travel within the region, and he's pretty reasonable. So definitely with you there on, don't fix something that's not broke. But tell me real quick also on this management team you found that's obviously helped you to scale. Did you already know them, or did they come with the park, or did you find them on the internet? Because that's always the challenge is finding good people you can trust and scale with. Because if you and if you tell me their name and phone number, I would like to know that.
Yeah.
After the show, we've purposely not given their contacts out.
John Smith and Joan Smith, and trust me.
That's right.
Yeah. No.
555.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that first park that my wife and I bought, and this is part for some of those that don't have a lot of money getting into this space, for less than a cost of a single family home, you can pick up a smaller mobile home park, right? And then the scalability from that is whatever X that home rent might be. But so that essentially what we did. I struggled finding an inspector that would go. We're about 40 minutes south of Kansas City. Kind of I guess a desert for contractors or inspectors. Nobody really wanted to go. So I finally found Doug. I'll give you a first name. So he went and inspected the mobile homes there. I called him after we closed or before we closed and said, hey, I'm struggling finding a property manager. Like nobody will do property management down there either. So he said, well, let me talk to my wife, because he didn't really know anyone offhand that would. And his wife has a background in some corporate work and project management work. So they've just been a great team together. And then they've been willing to grow with us and scale with us. So they see the potential and where we're going with it. You know, we're trying to create legacy wealth for our families, for our kids, and like most people, just create a great community and value for our residents, somewhere they're proud to live and call home. So that's the short story of how we found them, and they've just been great in scaling up with us.
And I think what's really been beneficial for us with having that team, and kind of the initial team anyway, we've had other contractor teams that we've pulled together in Kansas City. For example, we have another team of 5 contractors that all work together. They're actually going to live in our Iowa parks and rehab them for a few months at a time, which, I mean, if you can find people like that, I definitely won't be sharing those names anytime soon.
Yeah.
But going back to that initial husband-wife team, the other thing that's been great about them is they've just completely like jumped in and learned our system. So we use Buildium, for example, for our property management, and she's in there at least as much as I'm in there. So she's helping me, like she's pulling the rents, she's pulling reports, she's training our new managers. We're actually going to be on site in a couple of weeks doing a day training for all of them, getting them up to speed on, I mean, not just Buildium, everything else as well. But that helps us a ton, where we don't have to be the ones that are necessarily hands-on all the time, because we've got a team that we trust and that can be up there within a couple of hours if needed. And then obviously making sure we've got good on-site managers as well.
So I think, and to give you an example, for like Doug today, he's traveling to Missouri to, he's got a couple of cashier's checks to close on a mobile home that we're purchasing there. And we got off Facebook Marketplace. And so, they're able to drop what they're doing and take care of those things for us that we obviously can't do being out here. And we're in, Idaho. So it takes us a full day just to get to Kansas City off of a couple of flights.
Sure. No, I think you've hit the nail on the head a little bit, that having a team that's flexible is key. I mean, for most of us, we have to start, and maybe we always keep this, by the way, start with a day job, or you can always keep the day job. And that's, you miss out on stuff like that. When Dad and I started, we both had day jobs. It was like, hey, can you go? No. Can I go? No. Well, tomorrow was too late. So we didn't have a team, and we weren't big enough to have a team, or we didn't have enough project load a team. At least that's what we thought. So it's the bigger your team gets, the bigger your portfolio gets. It does feel like in some respects it's a lot harder, but in some respects it's easier, because it's like I've told you guys before the show, my internet at my office quit working an hour ago. I was like, crap, I got to get home. So I live 12 minutes away. I drove home. I got an office at home also, but I got somebody else working on my internet right now, so I can go back there, have another call in an hour and a half. And hopefully I'll be back at my regular desk, and I don't have to ask the wife and kids to go play outside for another hour. But just having a team makes life easier, that's for sure.
Yeah. I think for Brett has done a nice job in helping us scale with sourcing. We utilize virtual assistants, like a lot of operators do in a lot of aspects, but a lot of his time was being taken up with underwriting deals, where if we can outsource that type of thing, it just frees us up to make connections with people. And, like the deal flow has been pretty cool. We starting out, if you don't know anybody, it's a grind to even try to get somebody to stay on the phone with you for more than 10 seconds. Right. But we've been able to develop relationships quickly and find other people in the space that are just willing to hustle and, bust their butts to get into the space and help find us deals and things like that. So that's been part of the success with our scalability as well, going from 2 parks last fall to now up to like 8 in less than a year. So
that's great. Well, let's touch on that a little more, Brett. I know for Brett, because I know you're the IT guy, so obviously using VAs is probably going to come easier to you than most. But can you shed any secrets on that, as far as where do you find them? Are you going through like an Upwork or Fiverr, or are you finding them on? Are they American VAs that speak English and you pay $10 or $15 an hour, or is it some foreign VA that's doing data research and they don't speak any English and you pay them 50 cents a day or whatever you pay them? I've tried VAs myself. And another member of my team does. He's got somebody in Florida, and she works out really well. But for some of the VAs I've tried, it's been like pulling teeth, at times. And
For sure.
I've been going the opposite route, just hiring more kind of executive assistant or secretarial roles in that I can see and touch and kick if I have to, right? Versus
Hopefully not kick.
they're in Philippines, and I don't speak that Filipino, right? So what can you share on that? And
Yeah, for
what
sure.
tasks are they working on? I'm interested in as well.
Yeah, no, so to your point, I've had a lot of experience in my career with contractors and offshore teams. And what I will say from my experience working with Suncrest Capital and finding our own contractors, you do see a lot of churn, unfortunately, where you've got to go through 4 or 5 people before you get to the right person that's good for you. In fact, just a couple weeks ago, we had to say goodbye to our graphic designer that was helping us out with the website and logos and everything, because it wasn't working out great. So we're on to finding another one right now. So I think just being willing to churn and find the right person. We do interviews too. So we usually use Upwork. We've tried Fiverr and a couple others, but Upwork is kind of the one that I like to use for a number of reasons. But we do several interviews before we identify who we're going to start with. And then even then, it may not be the perfect fit. So that's one of the nice things about having a contractor is it's really easy to terminate a contract. So some of the tasks we do, they range from very basic. We've got a contractor, for example, that we just set up with a VPN phone because she was having a hard time from the Philippines calling and getting into to call mobile home parks. She's helping us out now with rent comps. We've got people that are doing looking Facebook every day, about every 12 hours, scouring Facebook Marketplace for homes. Ryan touched on the group that we're using for underwriting, and just before you panic there, because I listened to your episode a few weeks ago on underwriting, they're doing the first wave of underwriting. So it generally saves me about 5 to 10 hours of my time, because they'll go through all the T12, they'll go through the OM, all the details, and they usually can give me a summary of everything. And then within about 30 to 60 minutes of my own time, I kind of can get to a point of whether or not it's worth it for me to spend more time on it. And I mean, actually, just sorry, diverging for a second, before I even will send them a deal, we have a ton of criteria we go through before we'll even waste that time, because we're paying those guys $25 an hour, which, as you know, for an onshore resource, let alone offshore, $25 an hour is pretty decent compensation. So we want to be careful with that time, but it's worth it to me because it's protecting my time too. So anyway, on that divergence, we're really strict about location. Like Ryan touched on, we've got to be within 3 to 5 hours of Kansas City because that's where our team is. We both have day jobs. We can't be going to Florida for stuff. We've got to have a team we can rely on that can help us with stuff. So, I mean, having that strict geography, we can say no to a lot of stuff really fast. And then just kind of looking at a few other aspects of the deal, we can tell whether or not it's going to work. And then if it's kind of in that gray area, that's where I'll have this offshore team underwrite it for me. And then I'll take the deeper dive if things are looking good on it. So anyway, bottom line with contractors, you got to be willing to be patient and churn a bit. Unfortunately, you also got to be willing to put in some time to train, because they need a lot of guidance, I think, up front, especially.
Sure. No, I mean, training in general is just part of life, owning a company, but it's a time suck. It's challenging, but it's necessary at times as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know you mentioned geographic boundaries. That makes sense. It's kind of finding your footprint, finding your niche. And I know, Ryan, you mentioned earlier, when you got started, it was harder to get somebody to take you seriously or get a phone call from a broker. Now you guys have closed a combination of deals. What's the attack plan going forward? I mean, how much of your time are you spending looking at, like I looked at a broker deal this morning and I feel like I wasted 20 minutes of my life because it was so crazy on price. And I told my colleague, I said, and I've got to park in this exact same market. And I said, if this one sells for this price, I'm selling my other park with this broker because there's no way it should be anywhere near this. And I don't think it will, but it sometimes feels like the brokers have access to lots of deals. I know a lot of brokers. Some of them I really like, some of them I don't care for, but sometimes I feel like I'm wasting my time chasing those deals. But then again, that's where there's deals there. And then you guys just closed some deals that were on market. So what's the attack plan going forward as far as broker deals versus from your own organic search?
Well, I completely agree with you. There are certainly brokers that I get a package from, and I hardly spend any time on it because I know it's going to be way overpriced. And so I've definitely come to learn whose deals to pay attention to and which ones not to pay attention to. So as you mentioned, the one in Iowa we got on market, it was listed without a price tag on it. So that made it a little bit more challenging to kind of figure out where where to settle. But after 3 months of negotiations, we got into a price on it. And actually, you were part of that negotiation, so you're familiar with that. Going forward, we're going to continue looking at brokers and networking with especially with local brokers that kind of are in a market that aren't necessarily national. We're continuing to try to expand our network there. We also have a couple of folks cold calling for us. So far, we haven't actually closed on anything there, but we've had several sellers talk to us, and we've got a handful. Ryan's actually got kind of a cool story there. We've got a handful that are like kind of warm leads that we're talking to, and hopefully we'll close with. The 3 we've got under contract in Missouri, just to give you an idea of kind of the mix of how we're finding deals. 2 are from a wholesaler, and that's the one Ryan touched on that we had a short due diligence timeline on, unfortunately, because of the dude that we were under the wholesaler's contract. Although we did get an extension, we were able to negotiate there. But the other one we actually got from our network. So someone, the person that brought it to us is a junior owner on that deal, and he basically said, hey, I don't know if the primary owner is interested in selling, but I'm interested in selling. Maybe we can make something work. And he kind of helped back channel that for us. So that was kind of convenient, not necessarily cold calling, but building network to get that deal.
Those are the best ones where they fall in your lap because it's something you did yesterday.
Exactly.
You're like, I had one recently where it's like a client couldn't get a loan because he wasn't local, and he's like, hey, I got this deal. I can't get a loan. If you want to waive my legal fees and pay a small fee, I'll let you have it. I was like, works for me. I wouldn't find it. I didn't find that deal. So it's like, yeah, build a brand, build a reputation, network, treat people right, and occasionally you get an easy one.
For sure. And I think there's a lot to be said, like once you close a park, I've heard brokers say that multiple times, that if you have a park, they trust you more than if you don't, because there's a lot of tire kickers. But even just being able to prove that you can close, like that you can get it across the finish line, is kind of huge, and people will talk to you a little bit more.
That's absolutely the case. Is not just once, but how big's your portfolio and stuff. I try to keep a relatively low profile on the acquisition side, but same time, I talked to a broker one day. He goes, "Oh, I got you down for this many." I go, "What? What about this one?" He goes, "Oh, you own those? It's a different LLC." I was like, "Yeah, that's me." And then it's funny, I've got a client that he doesn't know what I own, but he sends me junk mail like once a month. And here's the best part. He paid me, it was only like 10 minutes, but he paid me to draft the letter to send to Ma and Pa. And I now get that letter in the mail from him on a regular basis. And I'm like, he doesn't even know this is my park. And I'm like, and I'm not selling it to him, but I've never told him, but I chuckle every time I get it. I'm like, I'm literally getting, and my dad doesn't know that I did the legal work for this guy. So he sends them to my dad, who owns it, who's the contact name apparently on a park we have in Illinois. And Dad's like, hey, we got it. If you ever want to sell, this guy says he pays top dollar. And I'm like, yeah, I know that's what the letter says, but
I wrote the letter.
I told my dad, I wrote that letter. Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah, I think, and to the point of those that are, they're just trying to break in some way. Because that's where I started, right? But now Brett and we get to talk to people that are either referred to us or they find us on our like website or LinkedIn or whatever. And we're good with giving people time and just getting to know them and just figuring out how to add value to them and how they could possibly add value to us. So that's how we've gotten a couple of people to essentially partner with us making cold calls. Or if they hear of a deal, they're going to send it to us to take a quick look at. So as long as you can find, even if you don't have money to get started, but you can help people like us who are growing quickly in some aspect, because we pay like a finder's fee, like a lot of people will, or we'll give some ownership percentage, like a lot of people will as well for deals, and they can kind of learn along with us. As we have a lot to learn still. Every deal, as has its own unique things happen, and so I think Brett said getting deals to the closing, the finish line, and we used you for the Iowa deals, and you helped tremendously. Like I can't say enough of like the contracts that we were able to utilize from you will save 10x plus of what we spent on that, just based on. I'll let Brett kind of tell the story of what the sellers tried to do right at the end, and how your contract helped us a lot on that part.
Well, so we were buying from a group that owns several mobile home parks and has for 20 years or so. I think they're kind of at the stage where they're starting to divest of their portfolio, so we'll continue looking at them. But they were kind of trying to strong arm us really down to the wire. It was like 15, I'm not even kidding, 15 minutes before we're supposed to fund. And like the funding cutoff is 2:30, we're at 2:15 p.m. They're trying to say that they should get all the back rent. So any rent we collect after closing, they get. And that makes, by the way, no sense to me. Why would I do all the work to go collect this just to pay it to you? Like, if anything, I would just come in and be the hero to all these people and say, hey, I'm waiving your rent because I'm not getting it anyway. What's the point? But fortunately, Ferd's contract had in there, and frankly, I'd forgotten that it was in there, so I was glad Ferd was on these emails, had in there that we had already agreed that we got all the back rent. So that alone was worth several thousand to us per park, and it was 4 parks. So definitely a nice lesson learned there to make sure you got a bulletproof contract.
Thanks for the shout out. Yeah, I mean, that's, I've had that happen before where the sellers, they know, I mean, you guys were, I say you're already pregnant on the deal. Like you were going to close. You're
right
15 minutes away. We're talking about $8,000 or $9,000 on a multi-million-dollar transaction. So they know you're going to close. So they'll just be like, oh, we're getting the back rent. And I'm like, if it's the 7th of the month, as we sit here and record this, okay, and you collect July rent, I think it's reasonable to give them the 7 days of July rent if you later collect it. But June rent, May rent, April rent, a year ago rent, I take the position, hey, seller, you had a chance to collect that.
mm-hmm.
You didn't.
Mhm.
And what I can't have you do is have some sort of lien against my new tenants. So you're shaking them down post closing, perhaps taking them to court, perhaps garnishing their wages, taking their tax refund, taking their paychecks. And now my tenant base is less stable because you're harassing them. So I had this happen once years ago. So I put in the contract, I get all rights to back rent, including prior months, et cetera. You got till the day of closing to collect it or don't. So in this case, the guy, he had forgotten, and his attorney forgot that was in there. And it's good to put it in. I used to put it in just the bill of sale and the assignment of leases for at closing. But as it happened in this case, the guy at closing redlines that provision, says, I'm not going to agree to that.
Yeah. So we'd already signed the assignment of leases at that point days before, and then they tried changing it last minute.
Right. So that's why we said, hey, go look at the underlying contract. It says buyer gets right to all back rent, and you will sign a form, a bill of sale, and a form of assignment of leases at closing. And these guys were, at that point, they became honorable, and they're like, okay, our bad, we didn't see it in there, and they signed.
Mm-hmm.
But they were just, you're right, they're being bullies, they're being strong-handed, and this was a term that had been negotiated months earlier. And the beauty of negotiating months earlier is it was not contentious at that time.
Right.
And it wasn't even relevant. And in the meantime, they get a long due diligence period because of the complexity of this portfolio, that 2, 3, 4 months have passed. They haven't got rent. All of a sudden, there's now government aid programs that are about to send big checks. So the rent was real. It wasn't just pending eviction. It was like, no, there's thousands of dollars coming. So yeah, I'm glad that worked out for you guys. I'm glad that you got this thing over the hump. I mean, that's one lesson learned, right? Is just remember what's in your contract, remember what's important to you. But what are some other lessons learned in that portfolio? I know that was you guys had changed banks, title company was complicated at times. You had lots of DD. I think that would be an eye-opening. I'm sure you guys learned a bunch on that, and maybe some things that you do differently the next time around. But what stories from that can you share with our audience?
Yeah, so there were a handful of things that happened so we closed on the 25th, and just the last couple of weeks of that, there were a handful of things that kind of landed that really put us at risk of closing. So one of them you touched on there was we switched banks. So we had a bank several months ago give us a commitment, 4.5% interest rate, 70% loan to value. So pretty decent deal considering that the occupancy of the portfolio is hovering around 65%. But we had a local credit union come to us about 6 weeks ago saying that they would give us 70% loan to cost. So they'd be funding 70% of our CapEx budget, which is huge for us because we've got a lot of CapEx going on up there. And they were going to give us sub 4% rate. So better rate, some interest only, refinance terms were better. Everything looked better about this deal. The problem was there were still like some contingencies on that loan where they weren't firm, like going to sign. So I shouldn't have done this. Really, in retrospect, this was kind of a learning that I should have just made the switch as soon as that we were confident. But there were just small contingencies that I wasn't 100% sure this new loan was going to close on us. So literally 6 business days before closing, I still hadn't chosen which bank we were going to close with. And so title's confused.
I was confused. I didn't know what was going on. I looked at Miller.
I know.
Are they switching lenders?
Well, and I'm trying to play the game where I'm telling title, hey, I'm dating 2 girls. You can't tell them that I'm dating each other, you know, kind of thing. And that was kind of a nightmare, frankly. So we made the call to switch over to this credit union in Iowa. They closed for us. They were fantastic. And I mean, really down at the wire, we also had to switch it from 1 loan for all 4 to 4 different loans. So it's quadruple the paperwork. You know, say another one for anybody out of state, another big learning I had a mobile notary print all the documents and bring them to me for signing. And we're talking about hundreds of pages that I had to sign because it's 4 different loans, 4 different contracts, everything, right? And halfway through signing, I'm realizing that certain documents that I had on one park weren't showing up for the second park. So I started reconciling all the documents. Turns out I'm missing documents, and I'm down to like an hour and a half to sign all this stuff and get it overnighted to meet the deadline. So my learning was, if you're out of state signing, go to a title company. They do courtesy closings where you can pay them. They print it off. You're right there. They're a little bit more. I'm probably a lot more professional, a lot more organized, a lot more experienced than maybe a mobile notary. So if you can't be in person for it, that's what I'm planning to do for the future.
Yeah. Here's another tip. I don't know about Idaho, but in Missouri, you're not allowed to notarize yourself, but you can notarize your spouse. So my wife is a notary, my secretary's a notary,
wow.
my property manager's notaries, because you got to use your notary all the time on these 21st mortgage docs when you sell homes too. So I got notaries all over the place, and I don't have to. Mobile notary is expensive. It's like $250 a pop versus a one-time fee of $50 for my wife's my notary, and she's just like, "Are you buying more parks? I may not notarize this." So I'm like,
"Yeah, what does she charge you, Ferd? What does your wife charge you?" That's funny.
Yeah. So anyway,
well,
she doesn't charge me, but
yeah. Another piece on the 2 girls that Brett was dating, the lenders.
That's going to be the excerpt we're going to put on LinkedIn when we promote this. Brett says, "I'm dating 2 girls, and I couldn't tell them." And then
please don't.
We're going to tag his wife.
Brett would be. So the first one, they didn't require phase 1s. So, but the second bank did, and one of the park. So this is dealing with the environmental companies too. One of the parks has a bunch of vacant land, and so next to where the vacant land was, there used to be, what was it? It was like a
salvage. It was a salvage yard 30 plus years ago.
Yeah, 30 something years ago, and so that triggered phase 2. Well, originally they wanted to do phase 2 at all 4 parks, and it's like, no, the issue is only at 1. So we got them to just do the phase 1 at the 1 park. But that went all the way up to getting those results was like the last hurdle.
And it was scheduled for June 24th to get the phase 2, and we were supposed to close June 25th. So
luckily, I mean, we had to get on the environmental company and see if there was anything coming at us as far as, is there any mediation or mitigation to anything they found? Well, they didn't find anything. But it definitely held things up. It cost us a little bit more money at the end, and a little bit of seller concession or our concession to the sellers. But yeah, lesson learned on that piece.
Yeah, phase 1, phase 2, I've had to go through that several times. It's no picnic either, but yeah, the lesson I would suggest on that is we always get bids right out of the gate on those, and then if we know we need to get them, and then I've learned to go with guys that don't find problems, frankly. I mean, there's some companies that there's one here in Kansas City I don't use anymore, that when I used to do retail, we used them. They're more expensive to do big development ground, but they'd have a low ball bid for the phase 1, and they'd get the work, and then they'd always come back. We think you should probably do a phase 2. It's kind of a gray area. We think you should do a phase 2. Well, you got to do it then. It's like you can't go against medical advice on that one. So I got to get to phase 2. Well, now I'm in for another 10 grand versus somebody else charges $500 extra for the phase 1. And they shoot you straight, right? You don't need this. Here's a problem. There are no recognized environmental conditions. You don't have to go through the phase 2 or go through the borings and core samples and ground penetrating radar, et cetera. But I did have it happen where I bought a park in Illinois, got a phase 1, came back clean. Didn't think anything about it. Bought the park. 2 years later, I go to sell it. My buyer is gonna get it. He asked me for my phase one. I give it to him. It's clean. I said, why would you buy a different? Go hire a third party company. Just hire this company. It's gonna cost like $250 to update it instead of 2,000.
Mhm.
Well, he didn't. He didn't trust me or something, so he went and got a different company. His company says it fails at phase one. So I was just like, you gotta be kidding me. So I call my guy. So here's what the other guy. So here's the best part actually. I don't even get to call my guy. The buyer sees my guy's company name and personal name in the report, calls him, and says, my new guy says that you're wrong, you made a mistake, and you were too aggressive, and you should have called for a phase two for Ferd. And he's recording this. And the guy says, yeah, I could see how I was probably being a little aggressive. I could see why you should get a phase two. Yeah, I'd probably go for it. So I get a copy email of the transcription of this, like this guy's name is Lance. I call Lance and I was like, what the hell, Lance? I now have to pay for a phase two. And so Lance and I agree he's going to do a part of it for free.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the new guy, the buyer's like, well, your guy Lance is incompetent. We already proved that. I'm not going to hire him. So now I got to pay a different phase two guy to fix my phase one that I paid $2,000 for 2 years prior. So even when you do it right, it still didn't work out right for me. And it ended up the phase two cleared, we sold the park. It just cost me a few $1,000, but man, I was pissed. It was like, what could I have done better than hire a phase one environmental engineer and then rely on the report? And
Right.
still didn't work, right? But anyway, lesson learned there is don't hire Lance.
Yeah. Good to know.
Yeah.
That's when I might ask for a last name on after the call.
Yeah.
So I think one thing that did go really well with closing, though, that I'm a huge fan of partnering, and I can tell you like all along why it's been beneficial for me to be partnering with Ryan. But during closing, we have our entity set up that I can be the only signer, which we learned with our first park. It was a nightmare. Like, no kidding, Ferd, we're there with all of our wives are there signing, we're signing, and it was just a circus because I've got a million children running around me at signing. So anyway, so we have our entity set up that I can be the only signer when we're closing, which is fantastic. Because then last week, or during that same week, Ryan was out in Missouri the whole week doing really thorough due diligence on our Missouri parks, and there was no way he could have stopped to sign anything. So that was just nice to be able to tag team. And I mean, I spent hours that week on signing. He spent even longer on due diligence, and both of us were like, I don't know how people do this on their own. This is just, you can't be in two places at once unless you've got someone you trust.
That's a great point. That's how we do it now too, because it'd be the same thing. And we bought a mobile home the other day in Eastern Illinois, and the title company sends these documents, says, are you coming? It was 4 hours away from where my dad's at, and said, are you going to be here for closing? And I was just like, people still go to title companies for no, I've not been to a closing company in 5 years. I'm not going to the closing it was a $9,000 mobile home. I'm not going for a multi-million-dollar transaction. So the lesson learned there is you can close remote and one person can sign. You just need an authorizing resolution from the rest of the members allowing it. And it makes it easy compared to the old way. But yeah, you guys have figured it out.
Yeah, there's no way we could scale as fast as we have without our partnership relationship and having strengths the other doesn't necessarily. So that's huge in finding a partner that balances your areas of growth. I guess that's the best way to put it. And then, like you said, I was on the phone with Ford measuring lots next to a dumpster in a park in Missouri and trying to figure this stuff out before closing, and Brett scrambling, signing documents. So yeah, you have to have a good team in place for sure. And I think a big part of that scalability too is putting the systems in place for not only your regional manager team, but we're utilizing what a lot of people, purchasing platform, which, Frank and Dave preach, and we've started using them. And that's been a huge help so far. We're still early in that process, but just organizing, we have 15 to 20 homes we're going to be rehabbing here in the first 16 to 20 weeks. And just keeping all of those expenses separated by park, that type of thing helps a ton. And they have a team that does a lot of the due diligence pieces for you for getting multiple bids, like on resurfacing roads or tree work or whatever it is. So finding those types of companies that you can get partnerships with that will save you time is big. And just getting those people systems down so you're not scrambling, making the kind of the minutia calls to banks or vendors. You've got people doing that for you, or you've got systems in place that are doing that for you.
No, I hear that a lot from people, is create systems, and it's kind of like this cliche word, but it's like everybody has to have their own system, and the system, like, and you got your example, for example, Brett's doing the signing, Brett's doing the underwriting, Ryan's doing more due diligence, or you just trade off roles. So that's part of it, is roles, separation of duties of people, and then also find a way to systematize this, that, I joke, but to get something so easy from a hierarchical level that you could get a monkey to do it with enough bananas. And if you can train all the way down, and then there's some stuff that it's very simple, like picking up the other end of the box, very simple, but knowing whether this box is to be thrown away or put in storage, higher level. Knowing if the box is fragile, higher level. Knowing if it's our box, or you have to go through the Abandoned Housing Act on the box, all these different things. And it's just, I've learned, especially with a lot of the contractors, is just, there's a lot of people who are good at taking direction and following direction, and there are fewer people who are good at creative thinking and problem solving. And both sets of people are valuable. Mm-hmm. And you got to get people in the right lane. One of my contractors, he's extremely talented, a lot more talented than I am on everything labor. But if he's in the middle of putting in 200 amp electric, or middle of welding a hitch on, I don't know how to do that stuff. That's really important. But where he sometimes gets distracted is without a system that tells him, and the system says, do everything on this list in order, unless I direct you otherwise, or Austin directs you otherwise. And you give him a list every single day, he can do it. But otherwise, he'll be putting in electric, and some resident will come by and say, hey, my air conditioner's not working. Will you come look at it? And he'll go look at it. Oh, your thermostat's broke. Oh, let me run to Home Depot, get a thermostat. Let me come run it, put it in. Oh, wait, now that I'm here. Oh, your toilet's leaking. Let me fix that. And pretty soon it's dark. And we're like, where is this guy? He goes, oh, I was helping a resident. Like, that wasn't what you were supposed to be working on. That's not even a park-owned home. That was nice of you to help. But like, I got a permit inspection at 4:00 tomorrow, and I need this electric hooked up. And it's an 8-hour job. Mm-hmm. And he's like, oh, but I was doing good work. Like, you were doing good work, but didn't understand the hierarchy of duties. So the system for us, we had to learn, was just give it to him every single day and just do it in order. And if you point and click in the right direction, he's a valuable member of the team. If you let him make his own decisions too much, you're going to fire him. I almost fired him 30 times, but he keeps doing something great. I let him back around. But from a micro level system to macro level and organizational, I'm with you that it's the only way to, get to bed by midnight and get all the work done, is to have other people doing other stuff. Especially you guys. I used to do it. Now I don't have a real job, right? But I used to have a day job, and I had to do this stuff at night, evening. It's like, you got to have a system. You got to be organized, or you're gonna fail, or you're gonna get fired from your real job, because they're gonna figure out you're goofing off all the time.
Yeah, we don't want that, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think that being an out-of-state owner for most of these parks that we own, it is important to get on site for the due diligence at some point. We have a good team. They could go and measure lots. They could look at pedestals. They could, work with people to get sewer lines scoped, all that. But there's a ton of value in you with that ownership mindset being on site, because you're going to see things a little differently. You're going to catch things that others may not, right? So I also recommend wearing a safety vest and bringing a clipboard, because then nobody really questions why you're walking around the park, and they just assume that you're some kind of contractor, and you could actually find out all kinds of interesting information when people do ask you, like, hey, and we're just checking the utilities and making sure everything's going well. How long have you lived here, and what's it like? And so you get some cool intel that way. A quick story. If we're talking the class type, it's a class probably warfare park. It's
technical term.
Yeah, technical.
Class C minus. We like we like the value add for sure, like a lot of people. But so we're doing due diligence a couple of weeks ago there, and this guy behind an RV, he's digging up where the sewer line connects in. So I just kind of go back there and talk to him a little bit and ask him, hey, what are you working on? And he's like, well, these old clay pipes, they're busted up. So that's good info to know. Like the sewer's not working. It's actually a septic system. And so he sort of indicated he was going to fix it himself, which I thought was odd. But then probably an hour later, when we're doing a drive-through video of the park and part of our we're documenting everything, I see him in his front yard. He's drilling holes into a plastic like tote, like a storage container, like just drilling massive holes in them. And I'm like, that dude is making his own homemade septic system. He just dug that hole and he's going to stick that thing in the ground and put it. It's like, okay, so I know if we close on this one, that's something we're going to have to fix. So there's value in being on site and seeing those types of things.
There's a lot of homemade gadgets like that, but man, what would make you think that I'm going to go create my own septic system out of different idea than I would ever had. But anyway, well, that's good stuff, guys. Before we jump, any other kind of final ideas or comments, and then before I forget, remind us how to reach you guys as well.
Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of echoing, I think the partnership model is fantastic if you could find the right partner. I didn't really get into this at the very beginning, but just quickly, you asked about our first couple of parks. So when I was first teetering on the mobile home park idea, I didn't really know what I didn't know. And so being able to find somebody like Ryan that already had experience and was willing to do a JV with me, that was kind of critical for me because I could learn that way. Like I said before, I'd already partnered with others on like multifamily and industrial, but learning something new, it's just kind of nice. It's almost like getting on the job training rather than having to learn for a year or two and then try to do something on your own. That was pretty fantastic. So totally believe in that. So my email is just Brett, BRETT at suncrestcap.com. That's also our website, suncrestcap, so CAP, short for capital, suncrestcap.com. We're both active on LinkedIn and Facebook. So find us, reach out. Ryan, what's your word of wisdom there at the end?
I think for us, it's fun. We enjoy it. It can be stressful for sure. But we both have day jobs. Anyone can do it if they've got the passion for it and kind of are doing it for the right reasons. So, we just love learning from each other, learning from our mistakes, learning from people that have done it for a lot longer than us, like you, Ferd, and there's a bunch of podcasters out there that do a lot of great content. So I was just a podcast junkie and read everything I could. And that's how I started, and then just started taking action. So I think a lot of people, like we talk to people they've quote unquote graduated from Frank and Dave's academy and they haven't done anything. Like they've taken no action. So taking that first step of taking some action, and then just keep grinding at it until, you get that first deal, and then it opens up and snowballs from there in good ways if you keep at it.
That's a great point. It reminds me, I was just, you're saying about going to boot camp. There's guys that I know that have gone to boot camp numerous times and have not made an offer in a park. And I was just thinking, you said that in your quote. I went to a Tony Robbins event. I've been to a couple of Tony Robbins events, and there's one called Unleash the Power Within. And there was a guy in my little small group. He's like, yeah, this is my 19th time here.
Whoa.
And the guy probably weighed 500 pounds. And, it was one of his struggles was his weight and his energy and his health. And the systems, the knowledge that Tony Robbins provides is world class. And it was there, but he wasn't taking the action. And he'd do it for a day, a couple of days. He'd come back the next year. He'd come back the next year. Been doing it for a decade. He lost 500 pounds. He lost the same 50 pounds 10 times, put it back on again. So it reminds me of the quote, knowledge is power is wrong. Knowledge is potential power. Execution beats knowledge every day of the week. And that's the same thing you're talking about here is you had lots of knowledge from being a podcast junkie, and that's not worthless. But if it's not worth much until you take that action. And you
Mhm.
guys have obviously figured out how to do that, figured out how to do it from joint venture, and it's fun to watch.
Cool. Yeah, I love that quote. Ryan's email is the same as mine, by the way. It's just ryan@suncrestcap.com.
All right, thanks for look at that partnership. You're watching his back. You make sure he gets added on these spam lists.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. Email
Yeah.
him first. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
Reach out. We're happy to help. We've actually, like Ryan touched on before, we've taken on some junior partners that are helping us out, and it's a win-win scenario. They help us out. We kind of mentor a bit, so we're happy to help in any way. Learn.
All right, sounds good, guys. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, Ferd. Appreciate it.